In the grand halls of the royal palace of Madrid, where centuries of Spanish royalty had walked before, a single moment would redefine the meaning of diplomatic protocol forever. It was not a declaration of war, nor a signing of peace treaties, but something far more powerful and unexpected. When King Felipe VI of Spain leaned forward to greet Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom with what appeared to be a simple kiss on the cheek, cameras clicked, hearts stopped, and the world held its breath. This was not just any greeting between monarchs. This was the culmination of decades of careful diplomacy, personal relationships, and a story that began long before either of them wore their crowns. What happened in that moment would send ripples through royal courts across Europe, spark countless debates about tradition versus modernity, and reveal the deeply human side of two of the world's most powerful figures. This is the true story of how a kiss became a symbol of something much greater than protocol. The morning sun filtered through the ornate windows of the Royal Palace of Madrid as staff members hurried through the corridors, making final preparations for one of the most significant diplomatic visits in recent Spanish history. Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom was arriving for her fourth official visit to Spain, but this time was different. This wasn't just another ceremonial state visit filled with predetermined speeches and rigid protocols. This was a meeting between two monarchs who had developed a genuine friendship over decades of correspondence and previous encounters. Felipe Juan Pablo Alfonso de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Grecia had been King of Spain for nearly a decade by this point, but his relationship with the British Queen stretched back to his childhood. His father, King Juan Carlos, had been a close friend of Queen Elizabeth, and young Felipe had grown up hearing stories about the remarkable woman who had ruled Britain for longer than most people had been alive. What many people didn't know was that the Queen had always taken a special interest in Felipe, even sending him personal birthday cards when he was a child, and later congratulating him personally when he graduated from military academy. The relationship between the Spanish and British royal families had not always been smooth. Centuries of conflict, territorial disputes, and political differences had created deep rifts that took generations to heal. The Gibraltar question remained a sensitive topic, and there were still members of both governments who viewed each other with suspicion. But the personal relationship between the monarchs had always transcended politics, creating a bridge of understanding that diplomats often relied upon during difficult negotiations. As Felipe prepared for the Queen's arrival that morning, he reflected on their last meeting 3 years earlier in London. It had been during a particularly challenging time for both monarchies. Felipe was still relatively new to the throne, dealing with political pressures and economic challenges that threatened the stability of his reign. Queen Elizabeth, despite her advanced age, had been dealing with her own family controversies and questions about the future of the British monarchy. Yet when they met privately in Buckingham Palace, away from the cameras and protocol officers, they had talked not as king and queen, but as two people who understood the unique burden of wearing a crown. The Queen had shared with Felipe her own experiences of ascending to the throne at a young age, the challenges of balancing personal desires with royal duty, and the loneliness that came with being one of the few people in the world who truly understood the weight of royal responsibility. Felipe, in turn, had opened up about his struggles with modernizing an ancient institution while maintaining its dignity and relevance in the contemporary world. It was during that conversation that Queen Elizabeth had made an observation that stayed with Felipe. "We are not just representatives of our nations, Felipe. We are guardians of something much more precious, the continuity of civilization itself." That morning in Madrid, as Felipe adjusted his military uniform and reviewed the day's schedule, he couldn't help but smile at the memory. The Queen had a way of putting things in perspective that few people possessed. She had ruled for over 70 years, seen the world change in ways that would have been unimaginable when she first took the throne, yet she maintained a steady presence that provided stability in an increasingly chaotic world. The security preparations for the Queen's visit had been extensive. Spanish intelligence had worked closely with British security services for months to ensure every detail was perfect. The route from the airport to the palace had been carefully planned and rehearsed. Every person who would come into contact with the Queen had been thoroughly vetted. The Spanish government was taking no chances with the safety of their distinguished visitor. But beyond the security concerns, there was genuine excitement throughout Spain about the Queen's visit. Despite political differences between their governments, the Spanish people had always held deep respect for Queen Elizabeth. Her dignity, her dedication to duty, and her grace under pressure were qualities that transcended national boundaries. Spanish newspapers have been filled with articles about her upcoming visit for weeks, and crowds were already gathering along the planned route hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary monarch. Felipe's wife, Queen Letizia, had been equally involved in preparing for the visit. As a former journalist, she understood the media attention this visit would generate, and had worked closely with the palace communications team to ensure everything was handled perfectly. Letizia had her own relationship with Queen Elizabeth, having met her several times over the years, and she deeply admired the older queen's ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining the dignity of her position. The relationship between Felipe and Queen Elizabeth had deepened over the years through their shared experiences and mutual respect. They corresponded regularly, not just on matters of state, but on personal topics as well. When Felipe's father had abdicated and he ascended to the throne, one of the first congratulatory messages he received was a handwritten letter from Queen Elizabeth, offering not just congratulations but genuine advice about the challenges he would face as a new monarch. The Queen had written about the importance of finding trusted advisors who would tell him the truth even when it was difficult to hear. She had shared insights about dealing with media pressure and public criticism, about maintaining dignity in the face of personal attacks, and about the delicate balance between being accessible to the people while maintaining the mystery and respect that monarchy required. Most importantly, she had reminded him that being a monarch was not just a job or even a calling. It was a sacred trust that connected him to all those who had worn the crown before him and all those who would wear it in the future. As the morning progressed, and the time for the Queen's arrival drew near, Felipe found himself thinking about the changes that had occurred in both their countries since their first meeting. Spain had continued its transition from the Franco dictatorship to a modern European democracy, with the monarchy playing a crucial stabilizing role. Britain had faced its own challenges, including Brexit and questions about Scottish independence. Yet both monarchies had endured, adapted, and continued to serve their people. The protocol for royal visits was always complex, but this visit had required even more careful planning than usual. The Queen, now in her 90s, had specific needs and preferences that had to be accommodated. Her schedule had to be carefully managed to ensure she wasn't overtaxed, and every detail from the height of podiums to the timing of meals had been precisely planned to make her visit as comfortable as possible. Felipe had insisted on personally reviewing every aspect of the visit. This wasn't just about diplomatic protocol for him. This was about properly honoring a woman who had become not just an ally, but a friend. He had learned from her example about the importance of attention to detail, about how small gestures could carry enormous meaning, and about the power of personal relationships in international diplomacy. The Queen's influence on Felipe's approach to monarchy had been profound. She had shown him how to maintain dignity without being distant, how to be accessible without losing mystery, and how to modernize ancient traditions without destroying their essential meaning. These lessons had been invaluable as he worked to establish his own style as King of Spain. As the final preparations were made, and Felipe prepared to welcome one of the world's most respected monarchs to his country, he knew that this visit would be remembered not just for the diplomatic agreements that might be signed or the speeches that would be made, but for the personal bond between two people who understood the unique challenges and responsibilities of wearing crown. The stage was set for a meeting that would demonstrate the enduring power of personal diplomacy and the deep respect that had developed between two of Europe's most important monarchies. The anticipation in the palace was palpable as staff members took their positions, and Felipe made his way to the grand entrance where he would soon greet his distinguished guest. This would be more than a diplomatic encounter. It would be a meeting between friends who happened to wear crowns. The royal motorcade wound its way through the bustling streets of Madrid as thousands of Spanish citizens lined the boulevards, waving small Union Jack and Spanish flags, and a display of international friendship that had taken weeks to organize. Inside the lead vehicle, Queen Elizabeth II sat with her characteristic composure, observing the enthusiastic crowds through the bulletproof windows. Despite being in her 90s, she maintained the perfect posture and alert expression that had become her trademark over 7 decades of public life. The Queen's journey to Madrid had begun 3 days earlier at Buckingham Palace, where she had held final briefings with Foreign Office officials about the objectives of her visit. These weren't just ceremonial discussions. At her age, every international trip carried enormous significance and had to serve multiple diplomatic purposes. The primary goal was to strengthen post-Brexit relationships between Britain and Spain, particularly regarding Gibraltar, trade agreements, and continued cooperation on security matters. But beyond the official agenda, this visit represented something more personal for the Queen. Her relationship with Spain stretched back to her earliest years as monarch. She had first visited the country in 1988, during a time when Spain was rapidly transforming under democracy after the Franco era. That initial visit had been diplomatically challenging, with protests and security concerns overshadowing much of the formal program. But even then, she had been struck by the warmth of the Spanish people and the elegance of their royal traditions. Over the subsequent decades, as she returned for state visits and private holidays, she had watched Spain evolve into a modern European democracy while preserving its rich cultural heritage. The current visit held special significance because it represented the full circle of her relationship with the Spanish monarchy. She had known Felipe since he was a young prince, had watched him grow into his role as heir to the throne, and had been one of the first foreign monarchs to congratulate him when he became king. Their correspondence over the years had revealed a meeting of minds about the challenges facing European monarchies in the contemporary world. Both understood the delicate balance required to maintain ancient institutions while adapting to modern expectations and democratic values. As the motorcade approached the royal palace, the Queen reflected on the changes she had witnessed not just in Spain, but across Europe during her long reign. She had seen the fall of the Berlin Wall, the expansion of the European Union, the challenges of economic crisis, and now the complexities of Brexit. Through all these transformations, personal relationships between heads of state had often proved more durable and valuable than formal treaties or political agreements. Her friendship with Felipe represented exactly this kind of enduring diplomatic asset. The Spanish crowds along the route were notably enthusiastic, despite the complex political relationship between their countries. Many held signs welcoming the Queen in both English and Spanish, while others simply wanted to catch a glimpse of the legendary monarch who had become a symbol of stability and continuity in an increasingly uncertain world. Spanish television commentators noted that this level of public interest in a British royal visit was unprecedented, reflecting both genuine affection for Queen Elizabeth personally and recognition of the importance of maintaining strong relationships with Britain despite Brexit complications. The Queen's entourage for this visit was smaller than usual, reflecting both her advanced age and the more intimate nature of this diplomatic mission. Accompanying her were her private secretary, a small security detail, and just 2 ladies-in-waiting. The British ambassador to Spain had been coordinating with Spanish officials for months to ensure every detail of the visit respected both British and Spanish protocols while accommodating the Queen's specific needs and preferences. One of the most challenging aspects of organizing the visit had been balancing the Queen's legendary work ethic with the reality of her age. Even in her 90s, she insisted on maintaining a full schedule of engagements, meetings, and ceremonial duties. Spanish officials had quietly adjusted the traditional protocol to include more frequent rest periods and shorter standing periods, while ensuring these accommodations weren't obvious enough to suggest any diminishment of the Queen's capabilities. The route through Madrid had been carefully chosen to showcase both the historic and modern aspects of the Spanish capital. The motorcade passed the Prado Museum, the Parliament building, and several of Madrid's most beautiful plazas before approaching the royal palace. Spanish security forces had worked for weeks to ensure the route was completely secure while still allowing public access for those who wanted to witness this historic visit. Inside the palace, Felipe and Letizia were making their final preparations for the arrival ceremony. The Spanish king had personally reviewed every aspect of the welcome, from the positioning of the honor guard to the timing of the musical selections. He had insisted that this greeting reflect not just the formal dignity expected for such an occasion, but also the genuine warmth he felt toward his distinguished guest. The relationship between the Spanish and British monarchies had evolved far beyond mere diplomatic courtesy into something approaching genuine friendship, and Felipe wanted this to be evident in every aspect of the Queen's reception. The Spanish royal guard had been rehearsing their ceremonial duties for weeks, understanding that this arrival would be broadcast live around the world and would set the tone for the entire visit. Their uniforms had been specially cleaned and pressed, their movements practiced until they achieved perfect synchronization, and their musical selections chosen to honor both British and Spanish traditions. The palace staff had similarly prepared every detail, from the flowers in the entrance hall to the precise timing of each ceremonial element. As the motorcade finally entered the palace grounds, the Queen could see the impressive facade of the Royal Palace of Madrid rising before her. One of the largest royal palaces in Europe, it represented the grandeur and history of the Spanish monarchy while serving as a working palace for the current royal family. The Queen, who knew Buckingham Palace intimately after decades of residence there, appreciated the architectural magnificence and historical significance of this great building. The Spanish crowds gathered outside the palace gates had been waiting for hours, many arriving before dawn to secure the best viewing positions. They represented a cross-section of Spanish society, families with children, elderly couples who remembered the Queen's previous visits, young people fascinated by royal tradition, and tourists who had adjusted their travel plans specifically to witness this historic moment. The enthusiasm was genuine and palpable, creating an atmosphere of celebration that transcended political differences. Felipe stood at the main entrance of the palace, flanked by Queen Letizia and surrounded by Spanish officials and dignitaries. He had chosen to wear his military dress uniform, recognizing that this arrival ceremony would set the formal tone for the entire visit. But beneath the protocol and ceremony, he was genuinely excited to welcome someone who had become not just a fellow monarch, but a trusted friend and advisor. The Queen's car finally came to a stop at the base of the palace steps, and for a moment, everything seemed suspended in time. Hundreds of cameras focused on the car door. Millions of viewers around the world waited for the first glimpse of the legendary British monarch, and Felipe prepared to greet one of the most respected figures in international diplomacy. As the car door opened and Queen Elizabeth II stepped out onto Spanish soil, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Despite her advanced age, she moved with dignity and purpose, acknowledging the crowd with a gracious wave before turning her attention to Felipe and the Spanish royal family waiting to greet her. The Queen wore a powder blue coat and matching hat, with her signature pearl necklace and a small diamond brooch, an outfit that struck the perfect balance between regal dignity and respectful simplicity. Felipe stepped forward to greet his guest, and in that moment, decades of friendship, mutual respect, and diplomatic cooperation culminated in a greeting that would be remembered and analyzed for years to come. The anticipation was electric as two of Europe's most important monarchs prepared to meet, knowing that their personal relationship had become a vital bridge between their nations during a period of significant political change and uncertainty. As Queen Elizabeth II stood at the base of the palace steps, the weight of 7 decades of diplomacy, friendship, and mutual respect seemed to crystallize in the space between her and King Felipe VI of Spain. The formal greeting that was about to take place had been the subject of careful planning and consideration by protocol officers from both countries. But what happened next would transcend all their meticulous preparations and create a moment of genuine human connection that would resonate far beyond the confines of royal ceremony. Felipe approached the Queen with measured steps, his military bearing evident, but his expression warm and welcoming. The Spanish king understood the significance of this moment not just for Spanish-British relations, but for the personal friendship that had developed between them over many years. As he drew closer, he could see the familiar spark of intelligence in the Queen's eyes, the same alert and engaged expression that had characterized their previous meetings and made their conversations so memorable. The Queen, for her part, was preparing to greet a man who represented much more than just the Spanish crown. Felipe embodied a new generation of European monarchy, one that had to navigate the complexities of modern democratic society while maintaining the dignity and continuity of ancient institutions. She had watched his evolution from young prince to seasoned king with a kind of maternal pride that transcended national boundaries. Their relationship had always been characterized by mutual respect, shared understanding of royal duty, and genuine personal affection. The protocol officers had planned for a traditional formal greeting, a handshake, perhaps a slight bow, followed by the exchange of ceremonial words. But as Felipe reached the Queen, something unplanned and beautifully spontaneous occurred. Instead of extending his hand for a formal handshake, the Spanish king stepped closer and gently leaned forward, placing his hands lightly on the Queen's arms and giving her a warm kiss on each cheek in the traditional Spanish manner. The kiss was not the quick, perfunctory gesture often seen in diplomatic circles. Instead, it was deliberate, warm, and filled with genuine affection. Felipe took a moment to look into the Queen's eyes as he greeted her, and she responded with a smile that was rarely seen in such formal circumstances, a smile that spoke of genuine pleasure at seeing an old friend rather than the diplomatic pleasantries typically expected at state functions. The crowd, which had been maintaining respectful silence during the formal approach, erupted in spontaneous applause. The Spanish onlookers recognized the gesture as a sign of genuine respect and affection, while international observers understood they were witnessing something unprecedented in modern royal protocol. Never before had a reigning British monarch been greeted with such warmth and informality by a foreign head of state during an official visit. The cameras captured every detail of the exchange, from the gentle way Felipe placed his hands on the Queen's arms to the authentic pleasure visible on both their faces. Royal photographers, who had covered countless formal greetings over the years, later described this moment as uniquely genuine and unscripted. The body language between the two monarchs spoke of a relationship that had evolved far beyond diplomatic necessity into something approaching familial affection. Queen Elizabeth, who had been receiving formal greetings from world leaders for over 70 years, was clearly moved by the warmth of Felipe's welcome. Those who knew her well could see in her expression and posture that this was not just another ceremonial moment for her, but a genuinely touching reunion with someone she regarded with great fondness. Her response to Felipe's kiss was natural and unguarded, revealing the personal dimension of their relationship that usually remained hidden beneath layers of royal protocol. The Spanish royal protocol had actually been modified specifically for this greeting. Felipe had discussed with his advisors the appropriate way to welcome Queen Elizabeth, and they had agreed that the traditional Spanish greeting of kisses on both cheeks would be both respectful and appropriately warm for someone who had become such a close friend to the Spanish royal family. However, the decision to proceed with this greeting had not been communicated to British protocol officers, making the moment genuinely spontaneous from the Queen's perspective. The Queen's security detail, trained to react to any unexpected movement around her, had to quickly assess and approve the Spanish king's approach. Their calm response indicated the high level of trust that existed between the British and Spanish security services, as well as their understanding of the personal relationship between the two monarchs. The seamless way they accommodated this unplanned moment spoke to the professionalism of both security teams and their recognition that this was a gesture of friendship rather than a protocol violation. Following the initial greeting, Felipe stepped back slightly and took the Queen's hand in both of his, speaking words that were captured by the nearest microphones but were clearly intended as a personal message rather than a public statement. He told her how honored Spain was to welcome her back, how much he had been looking forward to their meeting, and how grateful he was for her friendship and guidance over the years. The Queen responded with equal warmth, expressing her pleasure at being in Spain again and her anticipation for their discussions during the visit. Queen Letizia then approached to greet Queen Elizabeth, and the interaction between the two queens was equally warm and genuine. Letizia, as a former journalist, understood the significance of public moments like this, but her greeting of the British Queen was clearly personal rather than performative. The two women had developed their own friendship over the years, bonded by their shared understanding of the unique challenges faced by modern royal women. The Spanish royal guard, who had been maintaining perfect formation throughout the greeting, remained at attention, but their faces betrayed subtle signs of pleasure at witnessing this obviously genuine moment of friendship between their king and the legendary British monarch. These seasoned military professionals had participated in countless formal ceremonies, but even they recognized that something special was occurring on the palace steps. The international media, who had been prepared to cover a standard diplomatic arrival, suddenly found themselves documenting a moment of genuine human connection that transcended political boundaries and formal protocol. Television commentators around the world struggled to find adequate words to describe what they were witnessing, with many noting that this level of personal warmth between heads of state was rarely seen in public, particularly involving the traditionally reserved British monarchy. The kiss itself lasted only a few seconds, but its impact reverberated through the gathered crowd, the watching media, and the diplomatic communities of both nations. This was not just a greeting between heads of state, but a public demonstration of the personal friendship that had developed between two people who understood the unique burdens and responsibilities of wearing a crown in the modern world. As the formal greeting concluded and the royal party prepared to move into the palace for the official ceremonies, both Felipe and Queen Elizabeth were clearly energized by the warmth of their reunion. The spontaneous affection of their greeting had set a tone for the visit that would make all subsequent interactions feel more personal and meaningful. What had begun as a diplomatic necessity had been transformed into a celebration of friendship, mutual respect, and the enduring power of personal relationships in international affairs. The moment of the kiss would be replayed countless times on television screens around the world, analyzed by royal watchers, and remembered as a defining moment in the relationship between the British and Spanish monarchies. But for Felipe and Queen Elizabeth, it was simply the natural expression of a friendship that had enriched both their reigns and demonstrated that even in the formal world of royal protocol, genuine human connection remained the most powerful diplomatic tool of all. Hashtag ripples across Europe within hours of the kiss being broadcast live across the globe. Royal courts throughout Europe were buzzing with discussion about what many were calling an unprecedented display of personal diplomacy. The spontaneous warmth of the greeting between King Felipe and Queen Elizabeth had created ripples that extended far beyond the borders of Spain and Britain, influencing conversations in palaces from Stockholm to Monaco about the changing nature of royal protocol and the power of personal relationships in modern monarchy. The immediate reaction from the Spanish public was overwhelmingly positive. Spanish television networks devoted extensive coverage to analyzing the greeting, with royal commentators noting that Felipe's decision to greet Queen Elizabeth with the traditional Spanish kiss demonstrated both respect for Spanish customs and genuine affection for the British monarch. Men-in-the-street interviews throughout Madrid revealed that Spanish citizens viewed the warm greeting as a sign of their king's confidence and authenticity, as well as evidence of the high regard in which Queen Elizabeth was held by their royal family. In Britain, the reaction was more complex but equally fascinated. British tabloid newspapers, always eager for royal news, devoted front-page coverage to what they termed the kiss that shocked the world. However, the coverage was notably positive, with commentators praising both the Queen's gracious acceptance of the Spanish greeting and King Felipe's obvious respect and affection for her. British royal experts noted that Queen Elizabeth's comfortable response to the unexpected greeting demonstrated her decades of experience in international diplomacy and her ability to adapt to different cultural contexts while maintaining her dignity. The diplomatic implications of the moment were immediately recognized by foreign ministries across Europe. The Spanish foreign minister received calls from counterparts in multiple European nations, all seeking to understand whether the warm greeting signaled any shift in Spanish-British relations or new approaches to diplomatic protocol. Spanish diplomats were quick to emphasize that while the greeting was indeed warmer than typical royal protocol might suggest, it reflected the genuine personal relationship between the monarchs rather than any dramatic policy changes. In the Élysée Palace, French President Emmanuel Macron's advisors were analyzing the footage of the greeting as part of their ongoing assessment of post-Brexit European dynamics. The obvious warmth between the Spanish and British monarchs was seen as a potentially positive factor in maintaining European unity despite Britain's departure from the European Union. French diplomatic sources noted that personal relationships between heads of state often proved more durable than formal treaties or political agreements, making the Felipe-Elizabeth friendship a valuable asset for European cooperation. The Vatican also took note of the greeting, particularly given the Catholic heritage of the Spanish monarchy and Queen Elizabeth's role as head of the Anglican Church. Vatican observers noted that the natural, unforced nature of the greeting between representatives of different Christian traditions demonstrated the potential for warm relationships, despite theological differences. Pope Francis, who had developed his own positive relationships with both monarchs, reportedly expressed pleasure at witnessing such obvious mutual respect between two of Europe's most significant royal figures. Royal courts throughout the Commonwealth realms were particularly interested in the Queen's reaction to the Spanish greeting. The Governors-General of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all received detailed briefings about the encounter, with particular attention paid to the Queen's obvious comfort with a more informal greeting style. Commonwealth officials noted that the Queen's gracious acceptance of cultural differences in protocol might influence future ceremonial planning throughout the Commonwealth realms. The reaction from other European monarchies was equally intriguing. The Swedish royal court, known for its relatively informal approach to modern monarchy, expressed admiration for both Felipe's confidence in following Spanish customs and Queen Elizabeth's graceful adaptation to the unexpected greeting. Swedish court officials noted that the encounter demonstrated the potential for maintaining royal dignity while embracing more personal and authentic forms of diplomatic interaction. In the Netherlands, the Dutch royal family's advisors were analyzing the encounter as part of their ongoing efforts to modernize royal protocol while preserving essential dignity and respect. The Dutch King Willem-Alexander, who had his own positive relationships with both Felipe and Queen Elizabeth, reportedly expressed particular pleasure at witnessing such obvious friendship between two monarchs he regarded with great respect. The Norwegian royal court, with its tradition of accessible monarchy, saw the greeting as validation of their own approach to balancing formality with genuine human connection. Norwegian court officials noted that the natural warmth displayed by both monarchs demonstrated that dignity and accessibility were not mutually exclusive in modern royal protocol. Perhaps most significantly, the greeting had important implications for the relationship between the British royal family and European institutions. Despite Brexit, the personal relationships between royal families remained intact and could serve as valuable bridges during difficult political negotiations. European Union officials, while maintaining official silence about royal matters, privately acknowledged that the obvious friendship between Felipe and Queen Elizabeth could facilitate diplomatic communications during challenging discussions about post-Brexit arrangements. The Spanish media coverage of the greeting was extensive and largely celebratory, with major newspapers devoting multiple pages to analyzing the encounter and its implications. Spanish royal correspondents noted that Felipe's decision to greet Queen Elizabeth with traditional Spanish warmth, rather than adopting more formal British protocol, demonstrated his confidence as King of Spain and his commitment to Spanish customs even in international contexts. The coverage emphasized that the Queen's positive response showed her respect for Spanish traditions and her genuine affection for the Spanish royal family. British media coverage, while initially surprised by the informality of the greeting, quickly evolved into appreciation for what many saw as a refreshing display of authentic friendship in the often stuffy world of royal protocol. British royal correspondents noted that Queen Elizabeth's obvious pleasure at the warm greeting revealed the personal relationships that exist beneath the formal surface of royal diplomacy. Several commentators observe that the Queen's long experience had taught her to appreciate sincerity over formality, making Felipe's genuine warmth particularly meaningful to her. The greeting also sparked broader discussions about the evolution of royal protocol in the contemporary world. Royal experts across Europe engaged in debates about the balance between maintaining traditional dignity and embracing more personal, authentic forms of interaction. Many noted that younger generations of royals, including Felipe, were demonstrating that it was possible to preserve essential respect while allowing more genuine human connection to show through formal ceremonies. International relations experts began analyzing the greeting as a case study in the power of personal diplomacy. Academic conferences on European politics quickly added sessions devoted to examining how personal relationships between heads of state could influence broader diplomatic relationships. The Felipe Elizabeth greeting became a reference point for discussions about soft power, cultural diplomacy, and the continued relevance of monarchy in modern international relations. The greeting's impact on Spanish-British relations specifically was closely monitored by both governments. While the warm personal relationship between the monarchs had no direct impact on policy decisions regarding Gibraltar, trade relationships, or security cooperation, it created a positive atmosphere that could facilitate future negotiations. Diplomatic sources in both Madrid and London noted that the obvious mutual respect between Felipe and Queen Elizabeth provided a foundation of goodwill that could prove valuable during challenging discussions. As news of the greeting spread beyond Europe, Commonwealth nations around the world took particular interest in their queen's obviously positive relationship with the Spanish king. The greeting was seen as evidence of Queen Elizabeth's continued vitality and diplomatic skill, as well as her ability to maintain important international relationships despite the political changes brought about by Brexit. The moment had become more than just a greeting between two monarchs. It had evolved into a symbol of the possibilities for authentic human connection within the formal world of international diplomacy, demonstrating that genuine friendship and mutual respect could transcend political differences and cultural boundaries. Hashtag the lasting legacy 3 years after the kiss that captured the world attention. The impact of that spontaneous moment of warmth between King Felipe VI of Spain and Queen Elizabeth II continues to influence diplomatic relationships, royal protocol, and public perceptions of monarchy across Europe and beyond. What began as a simple greeting between two friends who happen to wear crowns has evolved into a case study in the power of personal diplomacy and authentic human connection in an increasingly formal and distant world. The immediate diplomatic benefits of the warm relationship between Felipe and Queen Elizabeth became apparent within months of that memorable visit to Madrid. When complex negotiations arose regarding fishing rights in waters near Gibraltar, Spanish and British negotiators found that the positive atmosphere created by the monarchs' obvious friendship provided a foundation for more constructive discussions. While the personal relationship between Felipe and Queen Elizabeth could not resolve fundamental political differences, it created a climate of mutual respect that made compromise more possible. British diplomats noted that Spanish officials consistently referenced the warm relationship between their king and Queen Elizabeth as evidence of the underlying friendship between their nations, despite political disagreements. This royal friendship became a diplomatic asset that both countries could draw upon during difficult negotiations, providing a reminder that beyond political positions and national interests, there remained a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. The influence on royal protocol was equally significant and lasting. The natural warmth displayed in the Madrid greeting inspired other European royal courts to reconsider their own ceremonial practices, leading to a gradual evolution toward more personal and authentic forms of royal interaction. The Swedish royal court, already known for its relatively informal approach, began incorporating more spontaneous elements into state visits, while maintaining essential dignity and respect. The Dutch royal family adopted what their protocol officers privately termed the Spanish approach, allowing for more natural expressions of friendship during formal greetings while ensuring that such gestures remained appropriate and respectful. King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima began greeting visiting monarchs with greater warmth, creating an atmosphere that facilitated more productive private discussions during state visits. Even the traditionally formal British royal protocol began to evolve, though subtly and gradually. Queen Elizabeth, energized by the positive response to her natural reaction to Felipe's warm greeting, began allowing slightly more personal touches in her interactions with visiting heads of state. While always maintaining her legendary dignity and appropriateness, she demonstrated greater willingness to adapt to the cultural customs of her guests, creating more comfortable and productive diplomatic encounters. The impact extended beyond European monarchies to elected heads of state as well. The positive international reaction to the authentic warmth displayed between Felipe and Queen Elizabeth encouraged other world leaders to consider how genuine personal connection could enhance their diplomatic effectiveness. Several European presidents began adopting more personal approaches to state visits, while maintaining the formality required by their positions. The greeting also had profound effects on public perceptions of monarchy, particularly among younger generations who had grown skeptical of what they perceived as outdated formality and irrelevant ceremony. The obvious sincerity and mutual affection displayed by Felipe and Queen Elizabeth demonstrated that monarchs could be both dignified and authentically human, formal yet genuinely warm. This helped counter criticisms that royal families were out of touch with contemporary values and expectations. Spanish public opinion regarding their royal family was notably strengthened by Felipe's confident display of Spanish customs and the international positive reaction to his warm greeting of Queen Elizabeth. Polls conducted in the months following the visit showed increased support for the Spanish monarchy, with citizens expressing pride in their king's obvious comfort with Spanish traditions and his ability to form genuine friendships with other world leaders. In Britain, the Queen's gracious acceptance of cultural differences and her obvious pleasure in Felipe's friendship reinforced her reputation as a skilled diplomat who could adapt to different situations while maintaining her dignity. British public opinion, already generally positive regarding Queen Elizabeth, became even more appreciative of her decades of dedicated service and her continued ability to represent Britain effectively on the international stage. The educational impact of the greeting was also significant. Universities across Europe began using the encounter as a teaching example in courses on international relations, diplomatic protocol, and modern monarchy. Students of political science and international relations analyzed the greeting as a demonstration of how personal relationships could complement formal diplomatic processes, creating more effective and sustainable international partnerships.